We, of course, counting 100 days in office for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to see what the first 100 days in office have been like. What are the gains? What are the wins? What are the losses for these first 100 days in office? Also to feel the pulse of the people around the country to see how deeply satisfied or dissatisfied they are. We also would like to find out what your thoughts are. You can tweet at us at News Central TV on all social media platforms. But first, let's check out this package.
This was a major statement made by President Bola Tinubu on Inauguration Day. Although there were initial indications that suggested the Tinubu administration had plans to prioritize the judiciary, such as the signing of the bill on new retirement age for judicial officers, concerns have arisen regarding the administration's respect for and perception of the rule of law. These concerns include the continued detention of the former AFCC boss Abdulrasheed Bawa and former CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele, as well as the appointment of cabinet members, some of whom are currently under investigation for corruption.
But when you go ahead, for instance, to appoint such people, you are sending a message to the anti-corruption agency that these are my people, these are my anointed, they shall not be touched. It's as simple as that. And then we also have the issue of Bawa, and that's the irony. The former EFCC boss, who accused certain people, especially some former governors, of corruption. Now, one or two of those people are in power today as minister. A head of the anti-corruption agency has been in detention for such a very long time. Under the laws of this country, he shouldn't spend more than 54 days in detention. He spent close to 70 days, if it is not more than that. But it is only the court that has that say in determining whether a man can lose his freedom for a purpose for the public good. For instance, with regards to Emefiele, I'm not exactly sure that his incarceration by the DSS is the responsibility of the DSS. There is an EFCC and there is an ICPC. These are their responsibilities. But in the past few months, we have seen increased aggression, and aggressive behaviors and tendencies on the part of the DSS. They must be getting their brief and the encouragement from somewhere. And I cannot think of any other place than the presidency.
Legal experts have noted that the appointment of the new Attorney General of the Federation is a positive step for the administration, as his presence is presumed to address previous legal errors.
I am waiting now for the Attorney General to activate the process of having things done rightly from now onwards in terms of observance of rule of law. If we can make an excuse, we're making it because the man, Tinubu, may not be vast and schooled in issue of understanding what rule of law entails. Now you have an Attorney General that is a renowned person in the legal profession. One would expect that there won't be any repeat of what has happened so far, so that we can begin to rate the administration of rule of law now that we have a substantive Minister of Justice. That would be what I would take. But for now, before now, I don't think that the government has done well. Now you have it as an agenda. Maybe he should be sat down and schooled on the real meaning of rule of law. The rule of law means not violating the rights of your citizens, of obeying court orders, of ensuring that laws are complied with, that principles are adhered to.
Financial statements were put together and brought to me. I have refused to sign them. I will not sign them.
While corruption in and around the judiciary itself, such as the misappropriation of funds in the Nigerian Bar Association, continues to be a challenge, legal experts urge President Tinubu to genuinely commit to upholding the rule of law.
First of all, state executives, their excellencies, should ensure that they obey the rule of law and that things are done in tandem with the rules and regulations of their states, the laws, same thing at the federal level. And when there's a failure, they themselves must also try to ensure that if there's any breach, that they will call whoever is responsible or whatever institution is responsible to order.
If we have laws and you have sworn to those laws, the Constitution primarily, to obey the provisions of the Constitution, you have no other option than to respect it.
Furthermore, experts say how the administration handles pending legal issues and demonstrates respect for judicial independence will serve as indicators of its long-term commitment to legal framework of the nation. Ni Omani, reporting for News Central Lagos.
All right, and that was, of course, a package on the respect for the rule of law in the new administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Of course, the conversations have born not just from this administration, but even from previous administrations, and the level of respect that they had for the rule of law. The questions as to the Nigerian Bar Association, the different courts across the country, and basically how they've positioned themselves, how they've also created a country where the rule of law is is the primary thing that must be respected at all times. But I mean, I'm sure everyone remembers from the Buhari administration the way that the courts were treated, where court rulings were disrespected, court rulings were ignored, outrightly ignored, where justices had their homes broken into at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. This was in 2015 or 2016, where of course, president said that the rule of law comes in second place to national security or something like that. There have been many, many instances like that where, of course, the rule of law didn't seem to be the priority, in Nigeria. But that's where we're coming from.
Exactly.
And it's not, so it's not shocking to see that this is what Nigeria currently is dealing with seeming pleas that the government in office should respect the rule of law. You almost need to beg, that please respect the rule of law, which it shouldn't be.
Which is why
Will it be different
they've
now?
considered it hypocritical, or Nigerians considered it hypocritical that the ECOWAS, for example, was so particular about democracy, upholding democracy in Niger, especially because our president is the chairman of the ECOWAS.
Yeah.
So it's a thing of we haven't been able to perfect what democracy should be in our own country. So carrying it on, carrying the one in someone else's country is some sort of an irony.
Very true. And if you remember also, this is the same country that, for a couple of years, it seemed like court orders were being purchased. Court injunctions were being purchased. You seemingly, you can almost tell, that right after a ruling is given, that there will be a counter ruling a couple of days later, a couple of weeks later, in one state someplace. And I remember that I think the president had to summon the CJN at some point, or summon, the heads of the courts, at some point. I think the CJN, had to summon the heads of the courts across the country then for an emergency session to ask them what was going on. Why, a court ruling so easily gotten for some of the most unusual things. This is the same country that Walter Onogen, the former CJN, was removed under very, very suspicious, circumstances.
Yeah.
So it's a couple of things that really have defined the idea of, respecting the rule of law in Nigeria. Will the current administration act different? Will they be able to respect it better? Will they, do they understand the sanctity of the court?
But I think these questions that you're asking, a number of the answers can be looked at from the way in which the current administration has already started to handle a number of cases. For example, the Godwin Emefiele case, we've seen Abdul Rashid Ba. So you've seen that the moment they came into office, within a month of them coming into office, or I think 6 weeks of them being in office, we can see what has happened, how Godwin Emefiele had been arrested and not brought before a court of competent jurisdiction as the law provides.
Very true.
The law provides that I should bring him before a court of competent jurisdiction within a certain time frame, and yet he was held without any charge being leveled against him for over 30 days. I'm not quite sure the number of days, so I don't want to quote what I'm not sure, but he was held for a large number, like a huge number of days, to the point where it now seemed like there was nothing that they could bring up against him. It seemed that they had arrested him, kept him there first to go do their investigation so that they can now find charges that they would level against him.
Which is the normal modus operandi for Nigerian.
But it's not, it's wrong. It's
criminal justice system.
It's not what the justice system should provide. That's not what the Constitution provides. That's not what the criminal code provides. If you have a case against someone, even with Nnamdi Kanu, who's currently showing on screen, the manner in which Nnamdi Kanu's case has been handled has also shown that we have not really respected the rule of law. Yes, it wasn't this administration that started Nnamdi Kanu's chaos. It started with the previous administration.
Yeah.
But even as we've inherited it, it's possible to say, okay, the previous administration handled this wrongly. What are we then going to do to right this?
Very true.
But nothing has been done about it. Nothing has been said about it. It's just been swept under the carpet.
But I feel like there's also something that we might be getting slightly wrong, and it's also because of the way that the show has been run for a long time, with which we are expecting something different from the presidency, right? Because there's a new president, we expect things to be done different. But we forget that there is also meant to be expectations from the Attorney General of the Federation, the Chief Justice, of Federation, and maybe even the Nigerian Bar Association president. These are different levels through which the judiciary should be able to take a stance on how its affairs will be run. It's not dependent. It shouldn't be dependent on who the executive is or who the president is. The lineage through which the judiciary holds itself to account. CJN, Attorney General Federation, Nigerian Bar. I'm just putting the NBA president there, as well, he should be there, I guess. These, I feel, are people who should be able to, create a stance as to how the government, the judiciary system would be run in Nigeria.
That is in a
respect for the rule of law.
Yes.
They should be the one to instill that respect for the rule of law.
That's in a country where the independence and the autonomy of the judiciary is guaranteed. It's a conversation we've been talking about the independence and the autonomy of the judiciary right from when I was in university. I've been called to for many years now, and still it's a conversation we still bring up. Is the judiciary truly independent? When we talk about the different arms of government, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, the reason why they are separated is to ensure that there are checks and balances, and no arm oversteps its boundary. When you overstep your boundary, there's another arm to call you to order. But right now, the executive in a number of cases have acted arbitrarily, acted like they have no one to checkmate them. So how then do we talk about the strength of the judiciary? The independence of the judiciary hasn't really been respected. A number of court judgments have been given and have been ignored. So what precedents are we setting? What precedent did the previous administration set? What precedent is this administration setting, even in the first few weeks in office, not being able to follow court orders?
Yeah.
The conversation about the NBA president is another conversation for another day. If you ask lawyers, a number of them don't seem to be very excited about his current tenure. Yeah. They seem to be more excited about the previous NBA president, Olumide Akpata, who who has pursued, he's resigned from practice to pursue his career as a politician.
Yeah, but the point, that I felt it was important to chip in, is that, yes, we say there's a new administration, there's new people in power, so we expect that they would hopefully do things different. But I was just trying to point out that it shouldn't be dependent on, just every time that we have a new president. For example, Chief Justice Ariwola, who's the CJN, Lateef Fagbemi, who's Attorney General of the Federation, and of course, the NBA president,
Mikel.
These are persons that should also take a stance as to how they would ensure that the judiciary, must be respected. Yes, enforcement still depends on the executive to some level, but they would be able to take a, but enforcing the enforcement of those laws, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, we would see, and time will tell. The all eyes on the judiciary today, of course, would be the peak of where that statement has been building up to in the last couple of weeks. Nigerians, of course, are excited, anxious as to what the judiciary would give as its verdict today. They've expressed mixed feelings on the first 100 days of President Bola Tinubu's administration in different directions and in different regards. Some have praised the president for his efforts to tackle corruption and improve security, while others have criticized him for his handling of the country's masses and, of course, the petrol subsidy challenges. We have Umaru Kirawa tell us more in this report.
One of the most pressing issues facing Nigerians now is the aftermath of the removal of subsidy on petrol. The attendant hike in increase in the price of petrol has had a knock-on effect on the prices of other goods and services. This has caused hardship for many Nigerians who are already struggling to make ends meet.
The price of goods in the markets continue to increase day by day, and it's not very funny to the populace, and people are suffering.
In these first 100 days, all of us have seen different shades of pain. Directly affecting the student's life is the student loan policy. It's a very, very good idea, but then the question is, Is it going to be implemented? Are students going to really benefit from it?
The government has provided food palliatives to vulnerable Nigerians.
The federal government gave us about 3,000 bucks. The state government complemented with 27,000 bucks to see that everybody, or the most indigent among the population, get the relief.
We appreciate the federal government and the state government. So people are very, very happy.
Going by what is happening so far in the country, sincerely speaking, I can say people are not smiling. People are not smiling because he picked people by surprise.
Concerning persons with disability, the situation, we say, is very, very terrible because we are facing untold, unheard, and unforeseen hardships.
While some Nigerians are pleased with President Tinubu's effort to tackle corruption and improve security, others are concerned about the country's economic condition as many still battle for survival.
Is 5 billion naira adequate to Borno State? Take a simple arithmetic of calculating. If you place one bag of rice at the rate of 50,000 naira, how many bags do you think the 5 billion will buy? Just to give 300,000 people one bag of rice without beans, without cooking oil, without the transportation. 300,000 bag of rice is equivalent to 15 billion naira that you are talking about. Do you think it will solve the problem?
While hope is not yet lost for many Nigerians, suggestions were put forward to improve the economy and general well-being of the country.
Let them create an enabling environment that will make the farmers to go to their farmland to engage in cultivation. And then from there, they should have intervened on agricultural sector by creating the market. After facilitating the physical, then they now come into with technology.
Subsidies should be introduced somehow to food items. There should be price control on food items. Education, secondly, education.
I can proudly say that persons with disability campaigned for him. People participated in the political process. But up to now, we are yet to see any appointment for persons with disabilities.
The pain pool is there, but I think when we are a little bit exercising patience, things will be possible, I think, and we are praying for that.
It is believed that 100 days in the life of an administration is too short for a realistic assessment of performance. So, only time will tell whether President Bola Tinubu will be able to meet the expectations of the Nigerian people through effective implementation of the policies and programs of his administration as soon as possible. Umaru Kirawa, reporting for News Central TV, Maiduguri.
All right, that of course is a reaction of Nigerian citizens to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's first 100-day in office. A number of them have complained about the recent changes, of course, the removal of petrol subsidy and the resultant increase in the cost of living. There have been also references to palliatives and the measure and the manner in which they have been distributed, the approval of the palliatives in the first place, and the rather ungoverned manner in which these palliatives have been distributed. Tons of people giving a number of bags of rice. Nigerians have also complained about the lack of trust between the government and the governed, not trusting the fact that these palliatives will get to the people who need them. That's another thing.
I was just going to say that the things that have defined, the first 100 days have been mostly the sacking of the CBN governor, the sacking of Abdul Rashid Bauer, the FCC chairman, petrol subsidy removal, like you've mentioned, the increment of petrol price from 185, 187 to currently about 600 naira, the skyrocketing, of course, of cost of living in Nigeria, increment, of course, in transportation prices also.
Yes.
The palliative discussions, like you just mentioned also. Inflation rate, of course, moving to 24 point something percent, 21.
So bad that this is the worst the naira has ever gotten to.
Yes, and then also, yes, the naira eventually almost hit 1,000 naira to a dollar.
And even the policies that they made to sort of stabilize the naira in terms of them floating the naira, and now it's like, okay, this floating the naira, was it a good idea? Should you have pumped in more dollars before floating in the naira? And then beyond the floating of the naira, there have also been conversations as to CBN's oil for cash policy. So it's just like a number of these policies feel like an afterthought. It didn't feel like it was thought through before execution.
Yeah, and of course the information on what happened in previous administration and what our current external reserves currently are. The naming of the cabinet, which was heavily criticized because of some of the names that were in there. That of course it didn't seem like the technocrats that were promised. So these are some of the things that have defined 100 days. I normally would like to go back and forth as to is 100 days really enough to judge the direction or how well the government is doing. But people can say, okay, yes, you can tell in what direction the country is moving. Currently the president is in India for the G20 summit. It might also be one of the things that will be celebrated by his aides. The president is making moves to increase foreign direct investment and some of all of that for the country. But if it doesn't reflect on Nigerians back at home, then all these trips are useless. The president has a lot of work to do. Slowly, they've started to come out to talk about how badly beaten Nigeria's economy was under President Buhari. The same President Buhari that they celebrated and they clapped for, and they said that they were going
to
continue
build
on his
build on the good work he has done. It's at the end of the day, it still feels, a number of Nigerians felt like it was transition from one arm of a party to another arm. Like it just felt like a continuation.
It's pretty
because
much
they're all the same party.
Yeah.
One of the things that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was credited for when in his time as governor of Lagos State was that he had an eye for picking people.
Yeah.
He had an eye for picking the right people for the right job. And like you mentioned, when it came to time for him to pick his ministers, there were a number of concerns that people shared as to that. But I think it's still too hasty for us to reach any conclusions as regards the ministers. Let's still give them, the same way we're analyzing his 100 days in office, we give them another 100 days in office as well, and then see what the ministers would be able to achieve. A number of them have made weighty promises. They've talked about their plans for the country. They've laid out their plans for the next couple months. We're just going to have to wait and see. The records are there, and if they're not able to match their actions with their words, they'll be called back again. And hopefully, he'll be able to do what he needs to do, where if there are ministers that are not able to do the job, they will be fired rather than left there to be figureheads.
Yeah, absolutely. So that also depends on what he sees as doing the job. Because you can't, score a student or a candidate, poorly if you don't even know what
the marking standards or the grading standards
are. So I think it's also a good time to remind the current administration that millions of Nigerians have their lives entrusted in your hands. Regardless of how you see it, whether you like it or not, for the next 4 years, the trajectory of this great country is dependent on how you do things that you promise to do. The ministers that you put in place, and of course the decisions that you make. There will be no excuses. I heard Adams Oshomole saying that they inherited a bad economy. Nobody cares. There will be no excuses.
I mean, you knew what you were getting into before you were inheriting the economy. And
you will be judged, by of course what you're able to deliver in the next 4 years. If the tribunal, of course, keeps them in office beyond today. But we'll see. We'll continue to have these discussions. Remember, you could join us. Let us know your thoughts. What are your ratings for the current administration's first 100 days in office? Tweet at us this morning. Let's know, at News Central TV, what you think. Is President Tinubu taking Nigeria in the right direction, or should a miracle happen and get them out of office?
On a much lighter note, I believe you meant to say X at us, as opposed to.
Oh yes, X at us.
That feels.